I'm Natalia Loback, and this is Change the Conversation. I'm the founder and principal of Chart House Advisory Services, and I'm back with Chris Carter, who is the founder and principal of OrgShift Solutions. Welcome, Chris.
Natalia, it's great to be able to continue this conversation.
I'm so excited because as we were chatting in the last conversation and as we were preparing for what we were going to talk about today, something that was really interesting is that this big change that was brought about by the pandemic, where, we are all working out of our homes, and the way that, we used to do strategic planning was we would grab everyone, go to a hotel for 2 days, and hammer out a strategic plan, in a very time-sensitive, concentrated, focused way. And now this pandemic world has really changed the way that we do things. So tell me a little bit about what strategy looks like today.
Well, I must admit I'm a little nostalgic for the Post-it notes, markers, all that stuff that used to have on my hands, so writing up at the front on a flip chart, all those, having Post-it notes cover a wall. There's a part of me that really misses that, but there's another part of me that is nostalgic for something that actually maybe wasn't as good as we thought it was. That the process of engaging people, but there's only so many people you can put in the room. So that's sort of limitation number one. Limitation number two was you had to be in the same room at the same time. And which I think leads you to number three, there's a whole bunch of people who couldn't be there at the same time. So there's been an exclusion already happening. And if I were to try to sum up what I think good strategy making needs to have, is it needs to be highly participative and not just facilitator driven and take some notes and we'll create a nice report and give it to you. It needs to, we need to open the tent and have more people part of that conversation. And it needs to be collaborative. So if we think those are the starting points, then that's where I start from.
It's so interesting. And, having been part of so many strategic planning exercises pre-pandemic, there was this whole thing where you would go around and do what, is called the environmental scan. But, being able to respond to the direction and the strategy as it was being developed didn't happen before. And now it's happening, and it's so interesting. So tell me a little bit more about how that is showing up in the work that you're doing today.
Well, by breaking up an assumption that we have to do it in 2 days or in a very highly constrained time frame, we can have a conversation happen over a longer period of time, which then allows, if we break it down into good steps, then we can say, well, what do we stand for? Who are we? And now we're talking about our identity. And your point about the environmental scan, that's still important work and trends and so forth that the group that is meeting needs to nut over and think about what's important coming out of that more external environmental scan. And then the internal one that we always turn to, of course, is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I guess the strengths and weaknesses is more internal. But even so, but you need to take time, because if you're not taking the time, if you're forcing it fitting into a 2-day thing, then again, if we've expanded the tent, if we're having more people in the conversation, then they need to be able to, I guess, reflect on that content, understand what's important, and then and be able to surface that across all of the participants as much as possible in the conversation, so that we can understand that there's in fact probably more common ground than everybody even understood. And that's where the digital means to have these conversations more fully digitally enabled allows that to happen.
It's so interesting, Chris. As you were speaking, I was thinking about a strategic planning exercise that I was doing over the pandemic, and it was a crisis-driven one. So, not one that was happening on a regular schedule. This was precipitated by something that had happened in the organization. And what was really interesting was we actually had the opportunity to involve such a broad group of people that, in previous exercises would have been consulted, but wouldn't have been part of the development. And the value and the richness of the solution, and also understanding the challenges, and really understanding the challenges from multiple perspectives. Having that among all of your stakeholders, as opposed to just a management team and then trying to manage that from top down, was so, so powerful.
Well, I think that's the opportunity that digital brings to the table for strategy making, a more collaborative approach. Um, we can get practical here and give your audience some real practical ideas here. One, we can have broader town halls. That through tools such as Mentimeter and other kind of polling tools allow people to actually answer open-ended questions, and it doesn't really matter how many people show up. You're going to, especially if you have like an employee town hall, you'll actually get the question. You'll get the answers to the questions you're asking, as long as people understand what their role is. Or if you're working with a smaller strategic task force, let's break the work up into steps, as we said earlier, where let's brainstorm something here. Let's say, what is our identity? We maybe author individually or maybe in small groups, and we can do that breakout group thing electronically too, and have people share those. Now we understand what our identity is. We can actually vote on those things and get sort of the best aspects of all of these things. And then sometimes, yes, the consultant needs to go away, or the core team needs to actually spend some time sort of getting the best out of it. But that's an example of breaking a process up that doesn't necessarily have to happen in real time. And I think that's the essence of my working over the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, is don't assume everything has to happen during the Zoom call. There's work you can do beforehand using collaborative tools, and work you can do afterwards, so that the time you spend actually talking is about meaningful stuff.
Amazing, Chris. Thank you so much. I know that our audience is going to find those practical tips and your advice really, really helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we're going to be back because we're going to dive deep into one of your really interesting client experiences. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.